We're going to begin in chapter 2 today. And in chapter 2, we meet Joe Gargery and Mrs. Joe. Mrs. Joe is Pip's older sister, 20 years older, and she and her husband Joe have raised Pip since he was younger. And we'll frequently hear the expression that he was brought up by hand, which means that, he's this orphan that, but the, generosity and benevolence of Mrs. Joe, he'd be on the streets, right? So there's always this expectation that he should be really grateful that he was taken in by his sister. And Dickens is fond of creating character types, these kind of larger than life characters who are intended to embody certain attitudes that Dickens wants to either esteem or condemn. And Mrs. Joe is an example of one of these characters that Dickens, really wants to condemn and criticize. She's mean-spirited, she's self-important, she's pretentious, she's abusive. We see at the beginning of chapter 2 that she is, let's see here, that Mrs. Joe Gargery had established a great reputation with herself and the neighbors because she had brought me up by hand. And I've already mentioned that, she takes great, pride in this. She also has this device known as the tickler, which is a wax-ended piece of cane, and she likes to, beat Pip with it, and she's always feeling like Pip thinks he's better than he is, and she's always trying to bring him down a peg or two, not give him enough food, or put water in his milk and make him drink horrible concoctions and not eat very much, and always get a beating. Like, she's just absolutely horrid. Okay, she's so cruel and mean. She believes she's virtuous, of course, and she treats Joe really badly as well. She also imagined that she deserves a much better life than as a blacksmith. She says, it's bad enough to be a blacksmith's wife and him a Gargery without being your mother. And so she's not at all grateful. She's, feels that she deserves better than this. But then we have, I was going to say that Dickens often has these kind of disadvantaged characters, but they're greedy for status and wealth, and rather than humbly just kind of going with their life, or and I mean, it could just be that Dickens thinks that people belong in their social stations and that's it. But I think it's more so that he would want to highlight that no matter where you're at, just be content with it. If you can do, more to get out, that's great too. But just that he just has such disdain for, these unpleasant types of characters that are always wanting to push themselves forward. And this novel's full of these pretentious, greedy, self-important characters, okay? But then we have Joe, who is one of Dickens' most virtuous characters. In most of his novels, if not all of them, I mean, I haven't read all of them, there are these really innocent characters, and you can think of Bob Cratchit in A Christmas Carol, for example. And even Oliver Twist, this innocent, kind of victimized young boy. And so this is the type of character Joe is, that he's just, the epitome of virtue. He can't read, he's not very smart, but he is so loving and humble, and, the sort of the fountain of moral rightness.